Hey guys, welcome back to the Let's Talk Solve Tactics series. This is the third video. So I am at a 702 rating, and yeah. So if you would like to solve with me, it's black to move. White has just played rook to a2. Let's get started. If you want to pause the video, pause it now. Okay, so black is in somewhat of a dire situation, obviously. I don't have any pieces left, only pawns. So my only hope in this position are these two advanced passed pawns. So now the question is, which one do I push to, uh, survive this situation? So I think d2 makes sense because it's further from the king. e2, king f2, I'm not threatening to promote, and also at that point I'll not be able to push the d pawn either because the king will simply capture the e pawn. Uh, so d2 makes sense, pawn to d2, and he doesn't have any checks. So I'm threatening d1 at that point. The king cannot help. So if he captures my pawn, I take back, and I'm still threatening d1, and he cannot stop it. So he probably plays rook to a1 to stop me from promoting. But in that case, I push the other pawn e2, and both combined will force a new queen to emerge on the board. And we can bring a new queen. And black is winning. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, black to play. You can pause your video now if you would like. So this is a well-known pattern that you should be familiar with. The knight on the side on e2 cuts off this king from leaving the h file. Basically, the king is not able to go to g1, and due to that, rook h6 is checkmate. Okay, white to play. So most obvious move is to capture the bishop with check. He will be forced to block. If he blocks with his knight, I'll capture that as well. If he blocks with his queen, then I can capture that. And at the end of all the capturing, I will be able to capture his knight on b3 that's hanging, and that endgame should be winning for me. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause. So I notice my queen in the vicinity of the white king. That's the first thing I notice. Really, there are not too many forcing moves. Knight g4 jumps out because it threatens mate in 1. How does white stop that? White does not have any checks of their own. And I do not see a way for them to control the h2 square. The king cannot move. Possibly they move this f1 rook, in which case I can go queen h2 check, king f1, and mate them on f2. Yep. Okay, let's go to the next one. Black to play. Go ahead if you would like to pause. Okay, so there is this alignment. That's the first thing I notice of the two queens. So that means this knight on c3 is pinned. Also, my queen is attacking the bishop on e2, so that could be a tactical target. So in terms of candidate moves, knight takes e4, taking the pawn, taking advantage of the pin, jumps out. That attacks the knight a second time. And if white captures my knight, I will be able to take the queen. The queen on a5 doesn't have any checks or any aggressive moves that concern us. A move like queen to c7 could be ignored, and I can simply take his knight. What else can he do after knight takes e4? Maybe he can defend the knight with further with, let's say, rook to b3. And in that case, at a minimum, I can simply take knight takes knight. Let's say queen takes knight and take the bishop on e2. That should be good. Okay, I have to say I missed this move, but we are attacking this c3 knight twice, so we can, I think, take that. We also have an option to take this e2 bishop, so we should think which one is better. If I take on e2, oh, obviously, yeah, sorry. The knight on c3 protects e2, so taking this is correct. Okay, okay, let's keep going. So, white to play, mate in one. Okay. I'm sure very soon we will run out of these easy ones and uh, it'll be more challenging then. But until then, we can keep riding this wave. White to play again. So first thing I notice, I have this check. He's forced to block with the bishop, and bishop to h6 will attack the bishop a second time, and black queen is not in a position to help out. He may throw a check, but I can safely retreat the king to h2, after which there are no useful checks, and I'll be able to. I'm threatening mate on the other end of the board with rook takes f8. So let's do that. Okay. Okay, black to play. So we notice this pawn on e4 far advanced in white's position, and white's king position has all these light squares. So queen f3 supported by this pawn, queen f3 check comes to mind. So the king has a few different squares it can go to. If it steps on anywhere on the h file, so h3, h2, either of those I can be met by rook h8 with check, and which will force the king to come back to g1. And actually, if he goes to h3, that's immediate checkmate. But if he goes to h2, rook h8, king g1, rook or queen to h1 will be mate. So after queen f3 check, he probably is well advised to not go to h file and go to g1 or f1 instead. Does that make a difference? Can I still play rook h8, threatening mate? Uh, yeah, and I do not think he is able to escape. Yeah. Okay. Okay, black to play. Pause the video if you would like. So I noticed that I have this fast pawn, and white has just offered a trade of queens. So we need to calculate what happens if I take the queen and push the pawn. So queen e4, king e4, g2. His king cannot stop the pawn, and the knight has no checks. A move like knight f4 doesn't help, so I simply am able to promote. That should be clean enough. I don't think there is anything else we need to look at. Okay, and we have crossed the 800 mark, but let's keep going. Okay, another mate in one problem. White to play. Uh, okay, white to play again. Go ahead if you would like to pause. So again, I think it's about this passed pawn that is quite far advanced. So we want to move this rook out of the way, because the rook is in the way of the pawn getting promoted. So rook takes bishop check, he takes back, I go h7. Now black rook has to try and stop the pawn from getting to h8, but he's not able to get to the back rank, so he may throw a check. If we go to f2, then he's able to get behind the pawn and stop the pawn. So we should go to h2 with the king, and after that, that is, we are promoting on the next move, and the rook is not able to stop it. So that should be the answer. Okay, I had not seen this move. I'm curious. If I promote, what's the point? Uh, Rook a1 check, I'll just take. So yeah, doesn't make sense. Okay, let's go to the next one. Black to play. Pause if you would like. Okay, so I see that if I take the queen, his king is forced to capture back on g2, and then my knight is well positioned to fork his his king and rook, and I'll be able to win that rook for free. Okay, let's go to the next one. Black to play. Yeah, please pause if you would like. Okay. Uh, so I noticed this. My pieces in this endgame, my pieces are very, very active. The king on f4, the knight on g3, the rook on d2. Every piece of mine is much more active, even though white has uh, four extra pawns in this endgame. So I need to use my activity. Also, I noticed that the king and bishop are lined up, so rook d1 comes to mind, pinning the bishop. White is not able to defend. Also, that threatens a mate in 2 with rook takes f1 check, king h2, and rook h1 mate. So the rook is not able to help out. There are no useful checks. If rook e4, I just take with the f pawn. Uh, that should be it. The king is moving the king to h2. I don't think helps. Yeah, because I can even capture the bishop on f1 with the knight in that case with check, forcing the king to come back to g1 or h1, in which case moving the knight back to g3 will be a discovered check, and he'll be checkmated soon thereafter. Okay. Okay. Black to play. So I see that uh, white has pinned himself, uh, the queen that is. The queen is now pinned, and the queen is attacked once by my queen and protected only by the king. So using the pin, rook e2 check, sorry, rook d3 check comes to mind. So rook d3 check, he is not able to take my rook because of the spin, and he'll have to move his king, and in that case I'll be able to take his queen. Now the question is, after that, let's say rook e2, king f2, queen takes e4, does white have any counterplay of their own? So rook b8 check, king h7, bishop g8. At a minimum, I can go to uh, h6, and I should be okay. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, white to move. So this is a somewhat scary looking position, and uh, what I see is this black king is almost out of squares. So, but these two pawns that are coming down the board are very threatening. So pawn to c6 comes to mind. That makes sure that the black king literally has no squares. I am threatening mate with rook to c5. So to stop mate, he must play rook to a5, in which case I'll be able to keep pushing my pawn. Pawn to c7. So let's say he pushes his pawn, pawn to a2, pawn to c8 queen. And now I'm threatening all kind of different checkmates using the queen. That should be winning. Is there anything better? I don't think so. Okay. So white to play? Yeah. Somehow this one is not obvious to me at the first glance. Uh, I seen his lineup of his king and queen, and also I see that I have an extra passed pawn, which is pretty close to being promoted. So if I can manage to trade queens and get my king out of the way, that should be winning. So with that said, maybe queen g1 comes to mind. Sorry, queen b8, that is. Queen b8. Uh, so he would have to go either to e2 or f3. And if e2, I can trade queens with queen g2, followed by taking his queen. Or if queen f3, or sorry, king f3, I can also trade queens with queen g2 check. He would be forced to capture, and I would capture. And even if he tries to stop my pawn with king f2, I still promote with g1 check. That should be good enough. Okay. Okay, black to play. So I noticed that yeah, white is attacking our queen. We can take the knight with check, but the queen can also take on g2 with a fork between the knight and the rook. If rook g1, then knight takes f3 check will uh, at a minimum also win his rook or his queen. Uh, so any other moves? Knight takes f3, queen takes f3. I don't think there is any follow-up. After queen takes g2, rook f1. Again, I can take his knight. Which way is better? Mm, I'm not entirely sure, but maybe taking with the knight. So okay, okay, he did not capture. He did not move his rook. Okay, fine. So I think I should take with check. He moves, probably trade queens and then take his knight. Okay, black to play. So I notice that we have a few pins going. So this is a pin. The pawn is pinned. So knight g3 checks becomes possible, forking his king and rook. And any other candidate moves? Any other ideas? This knight on e5 is hanging, but I don't know if playing a move like rook e8 or bishop d4 makes sense. Uh, I could also take his pawn on f2 with the rook or bishop. Those could be candidates. So rook f2, rook f2. I do not see a good follow-up. Taking with the bishop only means that I am giving up my bishop for a pawn. Knight g3 makes sense. I win an exchange at a minimum. Yeah. Okay. Probably will end this video once I reach 900. So a king and pawn endgame where I am one pawn down. Black to play, of course. Uh, so the most obvious move is king to d3, attacking his d2 pawn. He is not able to protect it in that case, but he can create counterplay on the other side of the board with, let's say, pawn to h3 or uh, even pawn to h4 followed by g4. So let's calculate a little bit. So king to d3. Now, what can white do? White can try to bring his king over to the queen side, maybe. Let's see. King f2. No, he's really not able to bring his king over. So okay, king d3. Let's say pawn to h4. King takes d2. Pawn to g4. Let's say I take his pawn. He takes back on g4. So hg4, king g4, and I push my pawn c to c3. He goes h5, c2, h6, c1, uh, and I'm queening way faster, so that should be winning. Is it any different if he goes pawn to h3 after king d3? So king d3, h3, uh, king takes d2, g4, hg4, hg4, c3, g5, c2, g6, c1 queen, g7, and at the minimum I'll have queen c8 covering the g8 square, stopping him from promoting. And I don't know that he's able to attack my c4 pawn. So king d3, king f4, king d2, or okay, I see some possibilities maybe. King d3, let's say pawn h3, king d2, pawn e4. But even then I'm able to push, so I think king d3 should win. Okay, I have to admit I didn't see this. So now do I take or not take? If I take his pawn, he takes back, king d2, h4, c3, h5, c2, h6, c1, h7, and again I can come back. That should be good. Oops, sorry, almost made a mistake. Okay, 899. So we have to do one more problem to get to 900. Fine. White to play. Uh, so this seems like a common trap in the Scotch game. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4. There is a, I mean, I may or may not be right, but I think this is a position that appears from to be from that opening. Okay, so this bishop on c5 is hanging, uh, and my bishop on e3 is looking at his bishop. So if we are able to capture his knight on c6, attack the queen, he's not able to take my bishop because then his queen will be lost. So he captures on c6 with either the b or the d pawn. Doesn't really matter. We can follow it up with capturing the loose bishop. And there we go. Oh, didn't see this coming. Okay, so what happens if I take the knight? Rook. So if I take the knight, he has a few options. So he can either take on e4 or go queen h4 check. I should have seen this actually, but okay. F e4, let's say rook e4. Now if rook e4, I probably should just continue developing with bishop e2. Let's say queen h4 check at that time. Then I can go bishop f2, and I should be okay. And what if after f takes e4, queen h4, then again bishop f2, and rook e4 can be made by bishop e2, basically leading to the same position. I think I'm okay. I am a bit curious to see if the analysis I did after knight captures e4 was correct. So f e4, yeah, rook takes e4 is the computer's top suggestion, and the computer says to go queen king d2, but I was thinking bishop e2, which is the third best move. So bishop a6, yeah, this was definitely missed by me, but white is okay, even though it's not terribly great. So queen h4 that I looked at, yeah, can definitely be met by bishop f2, which is the top suggestion. Okay. Okay, with that I will end this session. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.